All right. Steve, how you doing?
Hey, I'm good. How are you?
Awesome. I am so great. Steve, I think you are officially the first person in over 500 episodes that we are doing this on Instagram Live with. It looks like it's actually working. So, hey,
Wow,
there you go. Big
nice.
moment. Big moment.
Everybody,
Um,
what's up, world?
yeah, right. Everybody, they're all here now.
Yeah.
We got the Instagram people. Um, well, thanks for joining. I'm super excited about this. I've been kind of following your work for a really long time. And not only that, but just general online social media fun that everybody likes to have. And so
Yeah,
I was really excited for this. You are currently in California, but you have a very, very busy week coming up. Do you want
yeah,
to talk a little bit about what that looks like for you? I know there's a lot going on.
yeah. We are with ALO, we have a Colorado tour coming up, and I think it's like 6 shows in 7 days or something like that. It's all the little like sort of like mountain towns, ski towns, like the summer, a lot of summer series, a lot of free shows, which is kind of fun. And I think maybe even some festivals with other bands. I know one of the shows is with the California Honey Drops and some other bands we know. But I leave tonight and we play tomorrow, Friday. I can kind of let me see my calendar. We're um we're at Rhythms on the Rio tomorrow night, and then we're in Breckenridge on Saturday, and then Saturday right after our show, we hop in a shuttle, head to the airport, fly back to California, and then we'll see you at local. That's where you're
Yeah.
headed, right? Yeah.
I'm actually here in California right now, so
Oh,
just
cool.
flip-flopping states
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
Yeah.
Zigzagging around each other.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, we're kind of racing back for that. And then ALO and my other band, Brokedown Bakersfield, play on Sunday. And then we get to sleep in California Sunday night. And then Monday morning, we head back to Colorado to finish the Colorado tour, which goes until Friday at the end of the week.
Nice. Yeah, I
So
saw
yeah,
y'all are going to be at Dillon Amphitheater on the 5th, which
yeah,
is gorgeous venue, one of my
yep,
favorites
that's
actually in
Monday.
Colorado. Yeah. So anyone who's out there should
Cool.
definitely go and check that out because it's just a great spot, especially in the summertime. It's beautiful. So yeah, you guys get to
Nice.
hit up all the good towns and stuff in the summer. So
Yeah,
you
let's
know,
see, yeah, Dillon, Crested Butte, Paonia, which I don't know,
mhm.
and then Steamboat. So those are the other remaining towns.
Yeah, nice. So for locomotion, you are going to be playing twice. How is that for you? I mean, is that something like do you need to consider your approach when you're kind of doing multiple things, at a festival? Is it change that up for you, like how you plan for it?
Yeah, and I've done that before with other bands and other
Hmm.
configurations, and sometimes even back to back. And it's definitely like each band is sort of its own like unique, sort of organism. And you have to kind of calibrate to the people in that group
Hmm.
and also the music you're playing and kind of the intention of that. Each band kind of has their own sort of like slight variation on what the intention is. So yeah, you kind of have to like recalibrate and sort of like just switch gears a bit. And in this case, I think our changeover is like 15 minutes. So I'll have to do it pretty quickly.
I was gonna
And,
say, yeah.
yeah, and luckily for me, I know for Lebo it's a little different because
Hmm.
he's going to be on pedal steel for most of Brokedown at Bakersfield, if not all. And then for ALO, he's obviously on guitar for most of that band. So I think he's going to have a lot more like pedals to switch and like just a lot of, like technically a lot of different things to do. And for me, I mean, I think my bass rig is the same, so I can not have I don't have to worry too much about the gear stuff. But I will have to like sort. I'll probably change my shirt or it's all broke down. Bakersfield's kind of like a more like classic country band, so I might wear a button up snap tee or something like that, or um, but but yeah, I'll probably like do like a costume change
I love it. That's
and,
good.
and and then just sort of like refocus, and then and I'll probably be doing that all morning, like
Hmm.
just eyes on both sets and like what probably thinking about each thing like during the morning, so I don't have to think about it too much in the moment. But yeah,
Yeah, definitely. You know, when you were talking about kind of switching things up, it instantly made me think of Eddie Roberts and the Master Sounds. He's got his Lucky
Yeah,
Strokes band now, and
yeah,
the first time I saw them, which was well over a year ago now, I walk into Cervantes in Denver and I look on the stage and I did a triple take because he was wearing a Western shirt, full on, you
yeah,
know, like I'm like, where are the spurs? And and I
yeah,
was chatting with him later, and he said, you know, it's really important to be able to get into the flow of what you're doing, and that's what they are. And I just thought that was so awesome. I'd never seen him, you know, hair not coiffed, like just he was going for
yeah.
it. It was so awesome.
A different version of himself. I mean, honestly, like changing your shirt or even like a different hat can really make it can kind of actually make a big difference just in
Mhm.
like how you're relating to what you're doing. So yeah, it's funny people say like, "Oh yeah, I wear different hats for different things," but actually, it's kind of like doing that actually kind of gets you in the space of what you're doing.
Yeah. I've never
So
thought of
yeah,
that phrase literally. That's so cool.
I know, but literally, it actually kind of like can work also.
It makes sense. It makes sense. So,
Yeah,
how do you approach festival sets and writing the set? This is something I'm always curious about because in my fan brain,
yeah,
that seems like a challenge, but maybe it's not.
yeah. So for Brokedown and Bakersfield, we don't play a whole lot. In fact, we
Mhm,
hadn't played for 10 years up until last fall, was our first show after 10 years of not playing. So this will be our third show since we've kind of reunited. And we threw in some like new stuff and we also leaned back on a lot of old stuff that like worked really well. And so those set lists are like almost kind of write themselves. And Lebo, he's sort of like the leader of the band in a way. It
mhm,
was initially kind of his like concept even. Like he had bought a pedal steel and he wanted like a band to practice it in. So he like called all his friends and was like, "Hey, I have a pedal steel. I want to like use it." And he put together this like super band that like really forced him to kind of get to know that instrument quickly
mhm,
and well. And he's such a proficient musician that he kind of like just went straight into it and like got it down pretty good and just got better and better each gig. So it worked effectively for him really well. And then it also brought this band of people together that just love and for me it was a little bit new. I kind of like learned to love it, but the
mhm,
Bakersfield sound, which is like, specific country sound, leans a lot on like Merle Haggard and Buck Owens and the LA musicians that were sort of inspired by that, like Graham Parsons and Emmylou Harris. Um, so yeah, so that set list kind of is sort of done, and we that would probably work for a show or for a festival. It's kind of maybe pretty similar. ALO is a whole different thing because we'll go on tour and we'll change our set list every night, and we'll like add new covers, and we'll dissect old originals and like reinvent them, and we invite a lot of improvisation into the set. So, and we even like kind of carve it out in the set when we're writing the set list. We're like, oh, this
mhm,
song, let's let be open for a while and see what happens. Um, so for like ALO, the difference between like our own show versus a festival set, which I think is what you're kind of asking,
mhm,
you do kind of have to think about like we're there. We'll have some ALO fans there, but it's going to be a lot of String Cheese Incident fans. So you kind of think about who is at the festival um, and you can kind of like sort of like tailor your set to maybe lean toward like some of those like string cheese can be like a little bluegrassy, it can be
mhm.
a little electronic. They kind of can do a lot
Yeah.
actually, even like ALO in fact. So um, I guess maybe like tailoring it like with a genre in mind, that doesn't matter as much with the string cheese show because those fans probably are going to be open to anything.
Mhm,
But maybe you want to like include a song that is one of your more played songs on streaming platforms, something where people can connect a little
mhm,
quicker. And then maybe you throw a couple bust outs that will please someone like your fans or like that might you think string cheese fans might like or whatever. So there's a little more like tailoring involved at a festival. You're thinking about the bigger picture versus just like your fan base that's there at your show. Like,
Mhm.
um, and then there's people who, yeah, there's people who might know you, people who don't know you at all. So maybe, yeah, like a good cover or something might be good. Or it's short
Yeah.
too. Although I think we have a 90-minute set, um, which can happen at festivals, but you can also play a 45-minute set at a festival. So that's
Oh,
a whole
yeah.
different thing. Like, how do you jam it all in
I know, it's not
into a 45
easy.
minutes? Yeah,
Yeah.
honestly, like every show basically it is almost like completely unique.
Mhm.
I mean, when you're on tour and you're playing venue, you can kind of, there's maybe a little similarity each night, but there's still like you're in a different town. It's just every show has its own unique thing about it, and that's what makes it great because that feeds into what you decide to do. So that makes your show also unique, hopefully. So
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And especially like you said, when you are on tour, I am not a musician. I'm always very, very open about that. But I have been on the road working with bands and been there every day of the week. Different city, different places, and they do have a feel to them. And I always love to just kind of be around to hear the conversation about set list choices.
mhm.
What you said about cheese though and ALO just made me think of some things. It's kind of philosophical, but one of the things that comes up on this show a lot because of the name of it, having jam in it, is this concept of jam bands just as a thing, right? As this like amorphous kind of noodly genre
Yeah,
that includes so many different kind of niche elements to it. I mean, we've talked to bands that consider themselves dystopian jam bands. Like it ranges like metal thrasher jam. Like we've kind of been
totally.
all over, and I love that. Um, do you see yourself as like a jam band artist, or is that really just a phrase that like people like me like to talk about?
Well, it's funny, like the jam band community, I feel like has just embraced like all genres in a sense, kind of like what you're saying. And maybe that comes from festivals like Bonnaroo or whatever that would have maybe Fish one year, but and like like jam type of bands, but then started branching out and having bluegrass and electronic and funk and soul and old school and new school and like kind of everything, even pop to a certain extent. So I think that it's funny, like that term, like I mean, like distilled down, I think that term references like improvisation, like that's what jamming is, and it also kind of comes from like the Grateful Dead scene, which includes Fish and String Cheese and some of those bigger bands that have sort of fallen into that sort of category. Goose, I guess, would be another one,
Mhm.
even though I think they're even like a little like more modern poppy sounding sometimes,
Yeah, yeah,
but they
definitely.
go off on longer
Mhm.
jams too. I went to a show of theirs not too long ago, but um and maybe they use that as like a thing to like include in their music a jam section or whatever. And maybe they're just also influenced by Grateful Dead and Fish and groups like that.
Yeah.
But but yeah, it's funny like cuz like there's the bands that like I remember like Leftover Salmon, like their like description back in the day was like this like long sentence of like
Oh,
cosmic this bluegrass stomp,
polyethnic
like
Cajun
yeah,
slamgrass or
like all the
something. Yeah.
yeah, all these things. You're like, okay, that's like clearly like a jam band because they're like just every little part of the kitchen sink. And and uh and so there's bands that like infuse all those things, and String Cheese is a good example of that because they've done that well too, where they have like this bluegrass country side to them,
Mhm.
roots. I think a lot of playing Billy and um, yeah, they were like playing uh, like country bluegrass music, and then the other side of the band was more electronic, and they put it together, and then this and shows that really like blur the line. So there's bands that like take all those genres and sort of play with them, and then there's bands that are just like in their genre, but they're still like part of the jam band scene. And obviously, there's like improvisation in bluegrass, there's improvisation in rock and roll, there's improvisation in funk and jazz. And um, so, the improv thing can sort of like be part of all that, but there.
May have lost Steve. Steve, can you hear me? All right, see if we can get him back. All right. Let's see if we can get Steve back on here. There we go.
Okay. Yep. Sorry.
You're good. It happens. Par for
On
the
my end, I'm
course.
not sure.
No
It's
worries. We're
the
good.
excitement of the jam band topic that broke the
I
internet.
know it overwhelmed the entire system.
It's an overwhelming term, I think, for a lot of people.
Actually, that's a really good point. I think that's true.
Yeah, because people like it's hard. It's a hard question to answer. It's hard to know where you even
Mhm.
like fit in it. It's hard to know if you're a part of it or if you're actually doing something else. But you
Yes.
kind of are
Yeah.
part of it if you just are part of it. So I don't know.
Yeah, we've asked this question to a lot of people, and then essentially what it boils down to is like sometimes people will say, "Well, we kind of chose that path," and then a lot of times people will say, "It chose us," and we're in it.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah. That's a
um,
good. That's a good way to look at it, actually.
yeah, and then there's those that say it shows us, but we really aren't into it
Yeah,
for one reason or another, which I can understand and respect that too. And things change over time. I mean, like if you think back, the longevity of the work you've done, whether with ALO, just simply in the music scene, like to me, especially these days, right, when we see these kind of longstanding festivals starting to, unfortunately, kind of have their own struggles. There's a lot of bands that, either are or have, needed to take some time and just kind of reassess. How do you kind of sustain the work that you do, through just life, like in all the stuff that happens across time?
yeah. We've there's like I'm thinking about so many different things. Well, we've taken some breaks, and sometimes that's around like a band member having a kid. Mainly like when Zach, he was the first one to have kids, and when he first had his first kid, we did kind of take a little break and a little breather. And in doing that, and that at that point it was me and Zach and Lebo, and we had a different drummer. And me and Lebo didn't have kids, and we were like young and excited to play music and like see what touring felt like more than we had. And so when Zach needed a little time off, we kind of ended up like in some different bands and ended up touring a little bit and just got a taste for it. And we're like, oh, this is pretty awesome. Like, and then I think when we'd come through town and Zach would come see us, like, oh, that looks pretty fun. So
Yeah.
I think like I think as much as he was like, I don't know if touring's gonna be for me, especially now that I have a kid. But I think once he saw us come through, and I think he was like, I want, I'm still young and vital, and I could still maybe do both. And so he kind of
Yeah.
wanted to get back into it. So we kind of restarted the band basically. And at that point we had to look for another drummer because some time had passed. So we actually reset the band with, I think Matt Butler was even like our drummer
Mhm.
for a minute, like at that point. And then we found another drummer, this guy Adam Goodhue, and had him for the summer. And we did a bunch of like summer touring. Just we had an RV. Zach bought an RV and was like kind of doubling down on like, let's do it. And so we got into this. We had this like country camper, like not a tour vehicle, but it was like we
Mhm.
made it a tour vehicle for a summer, and it like barely made it around the Western states
Oh, yeah.
once. uh, and so, and then Adam was like not feeling it, and then we ended
Mhm.
up back with our drummer Dave Brogan, who we had played with in college, and he became the drummer for the next 20 years. And like, and when we got back with Dave, then we just kind of like moved forward. And Jack Johnson was a friend of ours from college, and he was having a lot of success like with radio, and
Mhm.
his fan base was growing and growing, and he invited us to come open for him. And then he eventually wanted to sign us to his label that he was just starting. So all these things kind of like went in motion, and it was all like pretty exciting. And we thought like we were kind of like a dance party band, which we kind of became in college. In high school, I mean, our ALA goes back to like high school. Me and Lebo and Zach,
Yep.
and and we were basically like just copying the radio, like what we
Mhm.
heard on the radio. Like we probably had like a little, and maybe even in a jam band sense, we were copying
Mhm.
like a little bit of grunge, a little bit of like power pop rock. Um, a lot of ballads were super popular in
Mhm.
the 80s and 90s. Like almost every like hard rock band would break with like a ballad.
Mhm.
So we were kind of copying that formula and thinking radio, and like we were writing songs that we hoped were like radio friendly. And so anyway, so like I think we had a dream when we were kids to be a radio band and like a concert band. And then in college we started getting a little more hippie, and we started jamming more, and we realized that the party scene was like you had to play long songs, and that was like actually pretty fun and effective. So we kind of loosened up and kind of got a little
Mhm.
jammier, a little more trippy. And so anyway, so we'd pulled Dave back in. That was like around 2002. And I think we wanted to sort of like step away from the party thing and bring it back to songwriting. And with Jack sort of like, kind of supporting us, we're like, oh, maybe there's a chance that we could get back radio chase. And that's always like a dangling carrot. You just never know like what's going to be popular on the radio. Um, but we kind of try to get back in that, and like being on the label and having like some radio publicists and touring around the country. And we had like a little success with that, but again, it's just like a dangling carrot. You just never
Mhm.
know. Like your weirdest song actually might be the one that radio stations like, and you're like, what, really?
Yeah, exactly.
So you just have to kind of like, you kind of have to just sort of like, I think this is what has kept us together so long, is
Mhm.
that you just have to kind of return to yourself and like what makes you happy, and what kind of music that you like writing and playing. And a lot of that is like personal reflection. A lot of it's like outward reflection on the world. And I think we draw a lot of inspiration from our fan base, and like seeing what they do and how they react to our music, and trying to write songs that we think will be good songs for like the next tour. Like what would be a fun song to play at a concert for all of our fans that they might like and we might
Mhm.
like. So we kind of end up writing songs that sort of like cater in a sense to them and to us.
Mhm.
And having a fan base, I mean, how lucky are we to have a fan base that we can do that with? So
Yeah, for sure.
yeah.
So what is that process like? Like, how are you able to kind of keep your voice um, within, the different opinions and thoughts of what a song should be? How do you all handle that?
I mean, everyone kind of does it in their own sense. And now that
Mhm.
we have a new drummer now. He's been with us for 5+ years, Ezra, um, Ezra Lip. And so and he's a writer. He's a like writer. Like Zach has always been kind of like our primary writer. And I think he just wakes up with a song in his head. And and I've always just like since I was 13, like he was writing songs, and I was sitting next to him at the piano and being like, "That's pretty cool." Like, you just came up with that? And I've always loved Zach's songs,
Mhm.
even the early ones that were like basically adolescent, like view of the world. But like he's just I love
Yeah.
he's matured as an adult. I mean, me and Zach and Lima are pushing 50. So we're getting older, and hopefully like we're using all that life experience. Like,
Mhm.
I mean, when you're young, you're like you want to be like an old blues guy. You want to like have like the experience of that, but you just can't
Yeah.
because you're 13. But that's kind of like you're like, oh, someday
Right.
maybe I'll
Right.
have the perspective of life and like what it is to go through life and have
Yeah.
challenges and have hard times and like have, because
Mhm.
that's where like you can really muster a lot of like real and soulful and meaningful experience and put that in a song. So now that we're halfway through life, I think we can legitimately speak to some of that stuff, and hopefully we're phrasing it in a way that is relatable and meaningful and connects and feels honest to us, like like where we
Mhm.
can just, if we were just playing the song in a room to no one, it would important.
Yeah, for sure,
But
and that does come
yeah,
across, as someone in the audience when something's authentic. I mean, and it just feels like you're saying it came directly from whatever it is that you're kind of pulling out of your own experiences. It's always something that is apparent. One thing as you're talking, I'm thinking there's got to be a really high level of trust at this point. I would imagine, like when you all are on stage, the improvisation pieces, do you all even have to look at each other anymore? How does that work? Because this is something that fascinates me in terms of communication um, during the more improvisational moments on stage.
yeah. I think that's like a really good thing to talk about and to sort of highlight. And I think for any band, and even like younger bands starting out, it's like developing that trust is like so important. And it's a lot of it is surrendering, and like over over experience and experience, the trust, that's just how trust builds, is like, oh, that experience went well, or that
Mhm.
experience didn't go well, but we talked about it in like a caring way afterwards. and um and so there's, even if an experience goes bad, it's still an opportunity for trust building.
Mhm.
So, but I think that is like super key to having a band be connected. And when you're doing a lot of stuff off the cuff on stage, and even in the studio to an extent, that it's just so important for that to be there. And if it's not, it's just not gonna work. You're gonna be doubting, you're gonna be anticipating, you're probably gonna bring anxiety
Mhm.
into the situation before you even need to. Um, and it's just, you just have to as best you can check all that, and just in the moment, especially trust. And then if there's a failure, like uh, circle back and like figure out
Mhm.
why that didn't work, and start over and do it again.
Mhm.
And hopefully there's, I mean, I think that's another thing that's kept ALO together so long, is that we have this like childhood relationship um, that just goes back so far, and we've been through so many experiences. And there's been times where like each of us probably haven't trusted each other in an ideal sense, but
Mhm.
like I think the fact that we stick it out and work through it, I think is what keeps us together, and it makes the next situation stronger. So I feel like it's only getting stronger. And yeah, it's a little
Wow.
scary because you're like essentially sharing your lives with each other. I mean, it's like a
Mhm.
relationship.
Mhm.
Bands are compared to relationships often, and with some bands it's two, three, four, five people. So it's like complicated.
Yeah, that would be.
You're
Wasn't that a?
balancing all those things,
Yeah,
and
it's a status option, definitely complicated.
yeah, totally. It's
Um,
complicated.
right, which I guess is not, like, to your point, not necessarily always a bad thing. It's just reality because,
Yeah,
you know,
it's
you bring
work and
yourself. Yeah.
yeah, it's I mean any team. I mean it's a sports team. It's a business team. It's
Mhm.
you can compare it to a lot of things.
Yeah, for sure. Um,
Yeah.
so you mentioned something that I'm kind of always curious about. We know that memory in general is not reliable, and so
Yes.
are you ever up there, right? And you're like, "Wow, this is kicking ass," or like something. You get off stage, maybe I don't know if you all listen back, to your shows, but I wonder if ever the recording of something doesn't quite match what you had perceived like, in the moment that was happening.
Totally. Like both ways. Like
Mhm,
you can think like, oh, that was like nailed it. Like awesome show. All the trains were good. All the like that's everyone's timing was perfect. And you listen back and you're like, huh. Like it's okay. Or, like listening
yeah,
back, it's not as like great as I remember, but
mhm,
and then the opposite can happen too, where you're like, oh, that sucked. That was like my worst show ever. And you listen back and you're like, it's awesome. Like everyone you could like yeah, everyone's having a great time. Like you're in your little bubble in your own little world and um yeah, like the the thing you created can be completely different than what it felt like when you were creating it.
mhm,
So, and all those live show recordings, like yeah, it's funny. You're making something that's gonna you're making like a painting, and then you can like a week later you can look back at the painting and you're like, oh, like that's weird, or that's like way different than I imagined it in the moment. But the thing is that painting is now like done and it's like there it is and it's gonna
mhm,
live on archive.org or nugs.net or whatever. It's there and it's like kind of done. Like
mhm,
you could go back and like remix it or like re EQ it. There's some things you can do, retouch it up, but for the most part it's done. Like what happened happened and
yeah, I like
um
that.
yeah, so it's like and everyone's in their own little personal bubble. I mean, like when you can even have a show where everyone walks off stage and everyone was like, "Oh, that was awesome." And you can all listen back and you're like, "Oh, that was like okay." So everyone could be on the same page
Mhm,
or everyone could be on completely different pages too. One person could have like the best show ever, another person could have
yeah.
the worst show ever.
Yeah, no,
And
that's a good point.
yeah.
I think that's one of the reasons why Fish many years ago now kind of instituted the "we don't talk about it"
Yeah.
thing, which I find
Yep.
fascinating. I don't have a
It's
personal beef
hard.
with it, but yeah, I would think, and that actually went both ways for them too, because I had read kind of an in-depth article about this at one point where it even relates to, let's say, somebody really liked something that happened. To say that would mean that they didn't like
Yeah.
something else as much.
Well, someone's I oh, it's so funny, like, because we kinda tried that, and we do kind of apply that a little bit, because you don't wanna even on a set break especially, because you have a whole rest of a
Mhm.
show and it's happening quickly. You don't wanna get bogged down anybody's critiques, like, too hard, um, and then even at the end of the night, you wanna, like, be like you wanna go home to your hotel or whatever and be like, "Life is okay." Like it's
Yeah,
not you don't wanna be like, "Oh god, what am I doing?" You don't wanna question everything you're doing. But the truth is it's really hard to find a time. I mean, you could say like, "Oh, let's talk about it over coffee the next morning," but, like, it's really hard to find the time to, like, break down your personal take on a show.
mhm,
And and sometimes you just have to filter yourself and be like, "Actually, you know what? Maybe it's not even worth talking about." But then maybe certain things are, and you also don't wanna let them fester because then it could be worse later.
yeah.
So it's so tricky, and it's like relationships too. It's like when's the right time to talk about a certain thing, like, but
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah. No, you're right. And when you're on the road, that's its own thing too. There's a really great book.
yeah,
It's probably almost 30 years or even older now. Um, someone who had traveled with Wynton Marsalis for years on the road, and he
Mm,
basically wrote a
mhm,
book about life on the road. With it, it was
mm,
about the music, but it was about that very unique kind of situation when you find yourselves with people for weeks at a time, in
yeah,
smallish spaces, and how you kind of have to be able to go within yourself, even if you're 6 inches away from somebody else. And
yeah.
so that's probably true a lot for a lot of different kinds of conversations, I would think.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, even like our crew is like they're really good about, keeping like I mean, you, like they're rarely critical actually, and I'm sure they have ideas about things they like and don't like about what we do. But they're very kind to like kind of keep that to themselves and most for the most part, and they'll talk candidly at times too, and we want it all sort of on the table to an extent. Um, but even within the band, like even like what you were kind of referencing, but like you could be like walk off stage and be like super enthusiastic and be like, oh my
Mhm.
god, that felt so good, and one person is just like, no way, like that was not
Yeah.
nowhere near like our best. And so like that huge excitement can like even make like the person who's not feeling it like actually feel even lower. So you
Mhm.
can really like sort of like those can really sort of teeter a little bit.
Mhm.
One person's enthusiasm can actually bring another person's like bummedness like even down further. And yeah, so
Yeah.
you really kind of just want to like sort of constantly take uh I don't know, like a little like temperature check on
Mhm.
everybody and sort of feel it out and like really delicate. And it's so like volatile and it can be so emotional and everyone's personalities, play into it. Like, some people are more emotional, some people are more excited, some people are more reserved. So it's like all those things are also part of the equation and
Mhm.
it's nearly impossible to get it all perfect, but there's, you find strides and you find moments of like joy, and I think each person has their own personal moments, and then there's also the collective moments, and pulling something off, or collectively as a team is great, and um, pulling off like a bigger picture, like a Colorado tour. Hopefully, that feels great by the end of it. You don't. Hopefully, it's like a steady climb to like making it great, 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 and great, and then you're done.
Right on. Right on.
Hopefully it's not the other. Hopefully, it's not like a a nosedive of a
Uh,
week where you're like, oh shit, things are falling apart.
it's Colorado. We love it.
I know Colorado's so kind to jam bands, I feel like, especially.
Yeah, I wish my co-host was here, my buddy Kevin, because he's
Yeah.
born and raised in Baltimore, and he has to sit
Mm.
here on the show pretty much every single time and listen to that kind of statement. And
Yeah.
he's just like, okay. I was like, sorry, but there's a reason for that, and it is that people go out and they support and they are just excited, generally speaking, for the experience.
Yeah.
And I probably read way too much into this because that's who I am. But I still think about those first couple shows after the COVID, the more intense pieces of the COVID era,
Yeah.
the quarantine times, and the gratitude and the joy just all the way around for being able to
Yeah.
get out at all. You, if I remember correctly, this is where your record shop kind of came into play, was around that time, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Exactly. I mean, with the pandemic and whatnot, like bands were just put on hold, like
Hmm.
no touring, no local live shows, hardly, unless you could do like an outdoor thing. Um, but all that was on temporary hold, and and also there was a bit of an existential, situation. Like people were dying, and it was hard to figure out like how uh, serious that was, but it was a fact that people were catching this thing, and older people or compromised people were not making it through it, which was pretty scary because you're like, oh, is that am I just like a few degrees away from one of those situations where it could get
Hmm.
serious for me or a family member or a friend. So the existentialness of it, in a sense, made me think about like, oh, what dreams have I always had that I have been pausing for whatever reason or another. And one of those was a record store. And so like that was, not only was I like, just home waiting for touring to open back up, I was also like, what what things in life, could I sort of, what boxes can I check before my time comes? And that's, your time
Mhm.
can come at any moment besides a
Right.
pandemic. So it's actually a greater question just to ask yourself in general. Um, but anyway, like that led me to like, and also like seeing like transitions in different neighborhoods in Oakland, like businesses closing, new businesses sort of like opening up, and maybe a little more of a youthful, peop yeah, some younger people starting
Mhm.
businesses, brick and mortar businesses or cafes or whatever. And so I was like, "Oh, I kinda wanna try that." And so I just jumped in. I found a spot that I had kind of a connection to, and signed a 3-year lease, and I, like, insisted there be a clause that, like, if I don't figure this out, we can end the lease.
Right.
And we could you and I could, the landlord, you and I could go separate ways, and just like, I needed an out because I was too nervous about it.
Mhm.
And he was very cool, and he liked me already. We knew each other. So like we were both in agreement about that. And so I had like kind of an out, and I kind of just sort of like, strolled into it. I kind of did I like I got I got the fixtures, I got like a sign, I got like one thing at a time. It wasn't like an explosive grand opening, like,
Mhm.
here's my great idea, my business plan, like all opening week. I like definitely like sort of eased into it and sort of
Mhm.
like snuck in under the radar. And that's kind of what was happening anyways during the pandemic. People were like, yeah, you couldn't do big grand openings and whatnot. So but the store, like, it kind of like it went beyond my like imagination. It was like not just a record store. Like I was hosting like art shows that were rotate every few months, and I was asking like artist friends, and I was meeting new artists and local artists, and like having like local art up on the wall,
Mhm.
and having like little art openings. And it turned out there was a backyard there that was like accessible to me. So I started having like little concerts in the backyard, and we kind of built this whole like back
Mhm.
porch that like the backyard. And just like every little quarter of the year, like something new would happen. And now I'm like about to hit 4 years, and it feels like it's just become this like sweet little like neighborhood hub, for like people who love music.
Mhm.
People, I have turntables set up, and I let people come and just practice DJing like with a
Awesome.
mixer, with vinyl. And people can just kind of do that, and it's actually
Mhm.
fun for me. I can work and someone else is playing the music, and then we have markets, and we have DJs that rotate during the markets, and I'll do pop-ups. I did one last
Mhm.
night at like a mezcal bar that just opened up around the
Mhm.
corner. So I brought like 6 crates of records and all the DJ equipment, and had 3 DJs lined up, and it was super fun. And so it's become this like, yeah, cool little like neighborhood, almost a little community hub, I'd say. And then of course I'm just like focused on inventory and records, and
Mhm.
I have a huge love for records. I connected with Eddie Roberts when I first opened, and had a bunch of
Mhm.
color red titles in there, and
Nice.
I've connected with other little record labels and cool distributors I like. So yeah, it's called Mars Record Shop. That's on Instagram, all one word.
Perfect.
And
Awesome.
yeah, I've fallen in love with it. I thought like, at any point I walk away, but there's like this part of me that is really enjoying what it's become. And it's got like a little life of its own. And so I'm kind of trying to figure out how to, now with ALO touring and all the other
Mhm.
bands, trying to figure out how to manage it all. And that's my biggest challenge in life right now, is
Mhm.
how to do that and also have like a life and some downtime,
That's
and
right.
not
Yeah.
work like all the time. So
Yeah, I mean, that's yeah, because it's 2 businesses,
yeah,
that require, just, some different things, but I love that
yeah,
it definitely has become that community feel, and I think,
yeah,
people respond so well to that. I see it, where I am in Colorado, and, yeah, you mentioned Color Red. I mean, that's really become that label so synonymous with the area now
yeah,
because of that community vibe. You know,
Yeah.
they're like a collective at this point in my mind. Um,
Do they
and
have a
so
shop, like a proper shop anywhere, or
so there
because
is
they're almost like
a
Third Man. They could almost be kind of
yeah,
like a thing like that, you
it's
know?
true. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there is a record shop, coffee shop downtown
Hmm.
that is very directly connected. And then
Cool.
Eddie will spin at a really great place, Revival Public House. The owner's huge music fan. Eddie's when he's in town, he's there on Thursdays, and he'll bring vinyl. Um,
Cool.
and it's a
I gotta
really
check
cool
that out.
place. Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
lot of fun. Dan is the owner. Give him a shout out.
Nice.
Yeah, he's just created like a space of his own, and that's its kind of own unique thing. So, um, I think when people find that, you really feel that, and it's a place you want to go. But like you're saying, it just requires kind of consistent love and
Oh my
attention and
God,
time.
it's so much, and like with records, they're so heavy. Like I love records, but a box of them
Yeah.
like boxes of them over and over and over again. You just like it. I thought I just got tired from playing bass, but I have a whole new thing going on with my
Right.
shoulders.
Well,
So,
I was maybe that I don't know if you'd be into it, but there's a couple of friends of mine who either own labels or are just really avid collectors.
oh
Over
yeah,
stuff, and that is a passion that when people have that, it's a really cool thing to see, honestly.
totally.
um, because there's so much out there. And I used to have a radio show that was more focused on like themes, and I'd pick a country and just kind of dig in and see like what's out there, for this place.
Nice.
And through that is how I kind of got more into the world of collecting. Even though I wasn't doing it, I was relying on people to kind of help me find the stuff that I needed. and
Yeah,
um and it really showed me kind of how extensive the collecting community is. It's everywhere.
it's global.
Mhm.
I mean, music and I mean, records have been around for 100 years. So, just within that time frame, like every country had their own little operation and their own like excitement about hearing their local musicians like on a recording. And it's just it's over the 100 years, it's like it's arrived at this like all music is streaming for practically free on your like smart device or whatever.
Mhm.
But to go from the origin of recorded music, it's like it had long, amazing path, and a lot of that existed on vinyl records. So there's so much to discover, really. Like
Mhm.
there's like so much music in the world that exists on vinyl and maybe still only on vinyl. So
Yeah,
that's
it's
that's
true.
part of like the treasure hunt is that's part of like the fun of it, is
Yeah.
like finding the stuff that not as many people have heard or whatever,
Oh, for sure. And
you know.
so I'm only a couple years younger than you, but I think maybe because of the era that I started really getting into live music, I was a I was a cassette person, and
Yeah,
I have hundreds upon hundreds
nice.
of cassettes still. And
That's amazing.
double tape deck, the whole thing. I
A
was never willing to
double
give it
tape
up.
deck. A double tape deck Walkman, or like a deck?
No, a deck. Like it's
A
a
deck.
good
Okay,
one.
yeah.
Yeah, works great. Is in use a lot,
Yeah,
and still gets a lot of love. And I say at this point, I rehome people's cassettes when someone doesn't want them anymore. They know they can bring them
yeah.
over, and they have a nice, comfy place to hang out for the rest of
Yeah.
time. But I think
I love cassettes
honoring, yeah.
for sure. There's a local label here, called Royal Okie. They're from Oakland,
Mhm.
and I have a whole like local cassette section. They've kind of like leaned into cassette releases because
Yeah,
the vinyl was so backed up for so long, and so all their releases are on cassette, and I'll play those at the shop regularly. There are some really good bands and artists
that's
on
cool.
that
Yeah.
label. Yeah.
And I think, Gray Boy had done that with Get a Job a couple years back. And I think it was
Oh,
because
cool.
of the vinyl backlog and just, cost and everything. Man, it was so awesome to walk up to a merch table and buy a cassette in like 2022 or
Yeah.
whatever that was. Super fun. I love it.
You know,
Um,
and that makes me feel like we should rally. Our ALO is going to be going into the studio
mhm,
soon, actually, like not too long after the Colorado tour. We'll be heading in for a couple weeks to record like some new music for a new record, and hopefully out early next year. But that would be really cool to do a cassette release. Oh my God. Our first album, me and Zach and Dan, we were a band called Django back in high school. And our first album was put out on cassette, and we brought like a box of 300 cassettes to like school our senior year, and all of our friends bought one. I think they're like
mhm.
$6 a piece or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
And we sold out, and that really honestly made us feel like we wanted to be a band, like
Mhm,
continue as a band. And so we all got into UC Santa Barbara, and we're like, let's go. So we like went to college as a band and like had this little leg up on, bands that were just forming in the dorms.
mhm.
We were already a band. We'd been playing for like years. But
That's
our first
awesome. Yeah.
release was on tape. And yeah, I still have a couple copies of it around here.
Nice. I'm glad you do. Okay, well, you know what? Time to
Yeah.
like just bring it back, a little nostalgia for
Yeah.
for old time's sake.
I probably
So
can't, I'd probably have to hold on to the originals, but I'll see if I can make you a copy of it.
Oh, that'd be awesome. I would love that. And it will get
Yeah.
played. So
Yeah.
I know that you gotta hop
Yeah.
here in a couple minutes. Before we do that, first,
Yep.
I just want to thank you so much. This was so awesome. I really
Oh, thanks.
appreciate, what you all brought to all of us in the scene, but just the joy and just the fun, um, because we all need that in one way or another all the time, more and more. I feel like. Um,
Absolutely.
are there, so you mentioned there's a release that's going to be happening, some recording soon. Anything else going on that you'd want to share just before we wrap up for the day?
Um, I mean, there's like for me, like my focus right now is primarily like ALO and my record store. So those are the two things I'm like,
Mhm.
if you like were to bump into me and that you're like, oh, what's going on? I would probably talk about one of those two
Yeah.
things. Um, so, but besides ALO and the record store, I'm still kind of active with other groups. I'll
Mhm.
do uh, like I've been playing with Reed. I know you know Reed Mathis, um, and it's been so fun locally to play with him more and more because he's
Mhm.
been switching to guitar. And
Mhm.
so he and I have teamed up on lots of Grateful Dead stuff, and he and Lebo started a band called the Bone Diggers. That's all like Paul Simon music. It's a little bit like jamming on Paul Simon. There's some stuff that gets stretched and reinterpreted a tiny bit. So I've been playing bass with them, and I think we're coming to Colorado. There's like some dates on the books.
Yeah,
Cervantes.
yeah. Yeah. Well, you all were out last Labor Day weekend for with Bone Diggers at Cervantes. It was like a
Yeah.
post Fish Sticks late night show, which
Yep.
was
That got
awesome.
pushed
So
because the rain, I think.
that's right. Oh, it was horrible weather
Yeah.
that night, and I ended up
Yeah.
getting to Cervantes. I thought I was late. Turns out I was really early
Yeah.
because
They
of
kept like
that.
holding us. Yeah, they're like,
Yeah.
this isn't done yet.
Yeah, it was
Hang on.
wild. Very
Yeah.
unusual, for
Yeah.
sure. And I was kind of joking that weekend was like a Bay Area musicians like cultural relocation field trip to
Oh,
Colorado
yeah.
because y'all
That's
there's
funny.
so many people out there, and I'd also gotten to see Electric Beethoven that same
Yeah.
weekend
Cool.
at the late night venue. Unfortunately, New Conscious, which had to close, which is super sad. But
Yeah.
um, Reed was on guitar, and Brian was playing the bass lines. Like
Yeah.
it took me like almost an hour, honestly, to figure out what was going on. And I'm staring,
Yeah.
and I'm like, where is that coming from, and how is he doing that while doing everything else? I mean, it was wild.
I think I talked to Reed about that a little bit. I think he was saying how like back in Jacob Fred days, he would play bass, but also had that have that soprano effect where he could play really
Mhm.
high like a guitar. Um, and I think now, because I think they're doing some Jacob Fred stuff again. I think he said he's like he's switched to guitar, but he's able to play bass by like taking the effect the other direction, like down
Yeah.
the octaves. So I feel like he's like just doing like the opposite of what he was doing before. Like he was on a bass that could play high, but now he's on a guitar that can play low, I think. And
It's
him and
wild.
Brian, I think they're like very intertwined, and I think they trade off the bass line a lot. Like Brian will do
Yeah.
it, and then Reed will do it.
Yeah, yeah,
But
they
they're
definitely share a brain in that way. I
share
think it
brain for
just kind of
sure.
happens. It's
I'm
amazing to
glad they're
watch.
playing again. I know. I can't wait to see a show of theirs because they're amazing.
It is. Yeah, no, and I'm very grateful for that as well, and just
Yeah.
to be able to keep seeing music that that is continues to get so much better, but also it's just time, I think, makes us all love it, even that much more.
Yep. Yeah,
Perfect.
and I think, Brokedown, we'll see what
Mhm.
happens with Brokedown in Bakersfield. So far so good. Maybe we'll get some more shows on the books. Um, such a fun band. And then there's all like the local stuff. Like
Mhm.
I kind of dip in and out of like different gigs locally. There's a thing that's been happening on Wednesdays. Like there's a Grateful Dead night we're in that, and it's really easy for me to like close up shop and just like drive straight
Mhm.
there. And I don't know if you know Danny Loring. He's an amazing drummer. A big part of like the Terrapin
Mhm.
Crossroads scene when that was happening
Mhm. Yeah.
before that closed. He was one of the drummers that would play there like a lot, and we met there. And he's managed to do like every Wednesdays more or less since he started when like post pandemic, once live music could open up. I think he's done 200 shows or something, like 200 Wednesdays in a row.
Wow.
But and that's his artwork behind me. He's an amazing visual artist, like
Nice.
painter, and he was the first artist I had at the record store. I was like so excited that, and he had never done like an art show, and I was like, dude, your art is so great. Like I want you to be like the person, the
Yeah.
vibe of the vibe of the shop right when I open. And so we have that little connection.
Mhm.
But if anyone listening is ever in town in the Bay Area on a Wednesday, like there's like the West Marin Dead Night, and then Stu Allen I think is back to doing his Ashkenaz
Mhm.
Wednesdays too. So there's two really cool Wednesday night Grateful Dead things happening.
Very
But yeah,
cool.
I do those, and yeah, yeah, I'm kind
There's
of
always
just that's
stuff.
my world. There's always
Yeah,
stuff. Yeah,
there's always stuff, and I mean, and it's yeah, it's just great because I think this is another part of the country where that can happen, and it does
yeah,
happen all the time. Well, let me have you hang on for 1 second, Steve, while
sure.
I get this outro going. But thank you again so much. This has been awesome.
Cool. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Got it. Absolutely. All right, hang on just 1 second.